Bad idea.
We are recording.
Yes.
We're good to go. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 6th, 2024, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. We'll start off, actually, before we start off, let me excuse Councilmember Sean Newell, who's traveling, right? And will be unavailable today, and Councilmember Matt Holton is just a few minutes late, so he should be here in just a few minutes. I'll start off with a review of our business meeting agenda for this evening. And we'll begin, like always, with a pledge of allegiance. Paula, would you be willing to do that? I was going to ask you
Yes.
for it. Yeah. Okay. So Paula will lead us tonight in the pledge of allegiance. We'll have a citizen comment period. And the one thing that I would ask as well, as people come and give staff cards, will you identify if they're for the regular citizen comment or for the public hearing?
Okay.
So right after our citizen comment period, we'll have a public hearing on the Tabachi annexation petition. And so if we'll designate which comments are for which, we'll go from one and then we'll go to the public hearing second. We're going to talk about this more under our staff report, so we won't go into detail about what we're going to talk about yet. And then anyway, so then we also have two quarterly staff reports tonight. So we're excited to have our police report. We've all been looking forward to that, especially with some of the changes in enforcement in our traffic division. And so we'll hear from, is Chief going to talk? It looks like he and Candy.
Both of them.
Both of them will
Yep.
present. Okay, great. And then we will also have a quarterly report from our Unified Fire Authority Assistant Chief Riley Pilgrim will be here to do the fire report. Then we have 4 items for consideration as a council tonight to vote on. Beginning with item 6.1, consideration of ordinance 408, adopting an amended budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. So this is where we had a public hearing on this our last meeting in January. We discussed it in detail. Scott, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. If not, we can ask the council if there's anything that they have questions or comments on. Anything you want to add at all?
No, I just fixed it on the copy that I included where there's not 4 8s, you know, so it's numbered correctly. So I fixed that. That's the only.
Other than that, no changes.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions from the council, either of you? No, okay, great. So we will vote on the amended budget then this evening. That'll be our first item. Item 6.2 tonight is a consideration of ordinance 409, amending the code section 11.20.050 concerning prohibited parking of vehicles. So Tim and Robbie, do you want to discuss that further, what that's going to be?
Yeah, so the ordinance is fairly self-explanatory where the areas where there's red highlighted. Basically, there's 4 main things. We're designating if you park 20 feet, then an intersection is prohibited. 5 feet away from a mailbox or within 5 feet is prohibited. And then we're delineating that stalls that need to be marked and are marked on public property, that those that you have to park in a designated parking spot. And also there's a violation of $100 if that occurs. So that's basically what the ordinance outlines. I think you talked about it 2 weeks ago. Robbie, did I miss anything on that?
You know, I think you talked about 5 feet within a mailbox. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's important if you don't get your mail. And it's the same thing we talked about, and then we agreed on the $100 fine for the parking violations. Since that time, I've actually gotten emails and texts from people saying, good for you, that's not enough, it should be $500, but $100 up there is a reasonable number, so thank you for the support.
Can we put this into our newsletter?
Sure.
So just those specific items as well as the increase in fine and yeah, if we could do that, I think. And then obviously through our social media as well, let's educate our residents as much as possible on this. So great. Any questions, comments from the council? Oh, okay.
Support.
Great. So item 6.3 for this evening is consideration of resolution 2024-08, ratifying the election of a mayor pro tempore. And so what this encompasses is we, as we get to this item tonight, Paula will have a card for us, right, Paula?
Yes, it's already.
It's already out there. And so all of us will be voting who we would like to see as the mayor pro tempore. A mayor pro tempore, just to clarify, is can act as in the official capacity of a mayor when the mayor is not present. So he can run meetings, you can still run legislative items and vote on ordinances and resolutions and do the things that a mayor does within a meeting context. So he would be able to act in that, he or she would be able to act in that official capacity. We do this every 2 years. So this mayor pro tempore acts on a 2-year basis. I actually have, Sean is not here, but he wrote that for me to give
Okay.
us his vote. I haven't even looked at it once.
Okay.
So anyway, so we'll do that. Any questions or comments on how that's gonna work? And then the last item for this evening is to vote on anyway, 6.4, consideration of resolution 2024-09, approving a new bank account. So Scott, tell us about that real quick.
Yeah. So with the purchase of the Hillside Plaza and then with us hiring a property manager to kind of run the day-to-day operations of that, we wanted to have an account that we had direct visibility into as well as the property manager. So we've opened that account. One of the steps that is required on an account that is with a municipality, well, any city or government entity in the state of Utah, is that we run it by you and you give authorization on that, and we have overlooked doing that. Then the secondarily is we need to give that authorization in the form of a letter to, in this case, Zions Bank, to say, yeah, we have approval from our legislative body to have that account open and running. And so that's basically the gist of what that is we need to comply with that step of that process.
Great. Any questions? Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so we'll vote on that, and then the last item is we'll approve our consent calendar, which is the minutes from the January 16th City Council work session and business meeting. Okay, one other thing I'll mention about this evening, I might be a little bit there's a youth group that's coming tonight, and so there's 15 to 20 of them, and so I might be I might explain a little bit more detail what we're doing as a council during our business meeting, rather than just moving along and supposing everybody knows what we're doing. So just be prepared for that.
Who is the youth group?
They live down off of Creek Road, and it's I don't know a whole lot about the kids other than they're high school age kids and
So is it through Brighton High School?
No, it's through a church group.
Oh,
A
wonderful.
church group, just a
Great.
church group of kids that want to learn more about civics and how cities work.
Great.
So I thought it was awesome.
Wonderful. Yeah.
They expressed interest. So we even have some goodies that the Chief Russo that we're gonna give them to make them feel important. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we have a busy agenda under our staff reports today with a lot of items to discuss. We're going to start with items 3A, which is a discussion of the CWH proposed annexation. So we've all seen that process play out. We've accepted the annexation proposal or application to consider as a council, and our staff has been working hard to get to a point where we can understand a little bit more about what we're looking at. So Tim, I know Tim and Mike Johnson are both gonna present or have some things to tell us about. So Tim, we'll turn it over to you.
Yep. So First of all, and we've had multiple discussions with this, and we received the annexation back in May, and we've talked about process, we've talked about a variety of different issues related to this. Tonight is the public hearing. There will not be a decision tonight. Will just be the public hearing on this and public comment. And so that is the main thing. We can have additional deliberations on this in other council meetings if the council wants to do that. And we'll actually place it on an agenda for a decision when the council is ready to do that. So those are the main things. There have been some questions from some council members about the costs, and we have not provided a lot of specific data on that, primarily because as we've evaluated it, the costs are very minimal for city services if you decide to annex this property. So for example, I've contacted the Unified Fire Authority, asked them what their service level has had to be for this. Assistant Chief Pilgrim has said since 2021, they've had 6 calls. That's in almost 3 years, 6 calls to this site. So it's very minimal. It's unlikely that there would really be any increase in our fees with Unified Fire Authority because of that. Talked with Chief Russo. We've had multiple conversations about this from a perspective of law enforcement. It makes, as far as from a proximity standpoint, we're fairly close to them. There's not a huge cost. There's not going to be a need for additional officers. To give you a little bit of context, some of our other larger subdivisions, the Giverny, which is over 100 lots, we did not have to add any police personnel for that as well. So the costs are minimal there. From a public works perspective, the infrastructure is built. Most of it is private up to the subdivision, including the road. We would not be required to maintain any of that. So as far as public works costs, that is minimal as well. Really basically nothing, no snow removal because of that private road up there. And then finally, and Mike will probably cover some of this, maybe I've covered some of the things that he was going to say. As far as building permits, there's still a number of building permits that will need to occur on the site, over 20, most likely, or a little under 20. And when we go through a permitting process, we'll have to do the review on that. But per our contracts, the review occurs based on the permit, and a percentage of that is what the cost is going to. The fee on that permit is what goes to covering those costs. So the costs are fairly minimal. I wanted to make sure that was clarified before. That's why you didn't see a specific analysis on that, because there really are not very many costs associated with that. So to clarify, that's kind of where we're at with those issues. And Mike, you can cover just the other things.
I don't have too much else. I know we talked about this at the last work session. I have some background information here. I can go through this, or I can just leave it up there. This is just, we have never, as a city, dealt with from the development side. The original entitlement happened before we were a city. And then all the building permits were issued under Salt Lake County, either before we became a city or after the property was disconnected from Cottonwood Heights. So we've never been involved from a development standpoint of what you see now in any inspections. So we'd be coming into this new with the remaining lots. We've communicated that some of the ordinances may be slightly different. It's not drastically different than Salt Lake County's, who does that today, but it may be a little bit different with our sensitive lands ordinance and some of the requirements there. So that's an expectation of the ownership group. And then just to reiterate, the 50-acre parcel to the north is not part of the Tabachi subdivision. It's owned by the same owner as the gravel pit. That's also part of this petition as well. And as we stated last time, we don't know whether that will be proposed as part of the future gravel pit development or not. A lot of it is steep, likely undevelopable hillside, but we could see something there tied in with the gravel pit in the future. We just don't know yet. Are there any other questions on the background?
Have we looked at the HOA? I mean, will that play a part in any of the permitting processes? They may be even more strict than what the county was.
HOAs, yeah, there are some HOAs in the city that have design standards and permitting processes, like Granite Oaks is a good example. That never plays into the city's review. So if the HOA has a permitting review or a design requirement, They go through that separate from the city. We will only look at whatever the city ordinance is for the zoning, and that would be something we would need to apply as zoning to the property. Typically, that would be whatever the closest, whatever zone is in Salt Lake County right now, the closest match to that would become the zone for that if it were to annex into the city.
But we are assuming it's in a sled zone, or it is in a sled zone.
Yes, so we've looked at that, the sleds, hazards, generally, and each lot may have to do additional scoping during permit. You've got slope stability, obviously, on this south edge. And then actually you have the same thing just from the slopes coming down from northeast to southwest. So you deal with some slope stability studies on these kind of northeastern lots, which are primarily the ones that are not developed yet along that back loop. A lot of these ones along overlooking the hillside down into the gravel pit and into the canyon are already permitted.
And would a secondary road come in that little green space right there
That,
between the lots?
no, this is an access to, I think, a water station. There is no, right now, there's a platted secondary egress. That's where this 7085 is. But there's an active application with Salt Lake County to amend that out of the subdivision plat. So there is no secondary access functionally for this development.
Who is, you're saying that the owner of
The HOA.
but this is technically, is this part of the Walker, or is this part of
No.
the Hibachi where it exists on the plat?
This right here, So-
The roadway that you said.
yeah,
it's
that
on
little
is-
stub is part of the plat today.
But there's nowhere that it would go.
Right now, it goes
That's what
on,
I'm asking.
you know,
Where would a
it
secondary
overlooks
access
onto
go?
a cliff down
Goes to Narnia or
300
something.
feet down below.
Because it's non-existent.
Well, even though so you've indicated that it's being, there's a petition or that they're currently trying to amend the plat to remove the road, and they is
Is Tavashi.
and why would they do that?
Well, the reason that I was told, and this is from the county and talking to county staff, is that secondary egress isn't viable based on how the gravel pit is graded out.
I
It's
think,
just-
Dale, they're gonna wanna turn that into another lot that they can probably sell and build a home, is my guess. And their argument they're gonna make is there's no point for a stub road because the road can't
You can't
go off
build
of a
one.
cliff.
Yeah.
Is my guess. And that, so they're gonna probably ask for that approval and then they would come back and turn it into a plot to sell, to build a home.
And from a city perspective and also from the homes that are developed, we understand that there's sprinkles, which alleviates, at least from the city code perspective, that secondary access need as long as the
Yeah.
homes are sprinkled.
Egress standards come from fire code. And Unified Fire is the fire department for Salt Lake County, so the standards are no different. It's, you know, different people, but the same group that's doing the fire review. What I've been told from the county is that plat amendment process is pending review by Salt Lake City Public Utilities for water. But Unified Fire has signed off on that, and I presume it's because they have other fire mitigation in place, like fire sprinkling each of the homes that are built up there.
Mhm. Well, I would like to go back to the subject of the HOA. Upon a little investigative work, we find that it's called the Tavachi Big Cottonwood Canyon HOA. And they have had their, basically, they've had their license to operate as a nonprofit corporation dissolved, was dissolved permanently in 2023 after they failed to file in 2020. And this is disconcerting to me that if they are not keeping their paperwork in order related to their HOA, which is how I perceive they would be able to maintain this roadway that is now nearly 15 years old. The roadway continues to be one of the main sticking points for me to be able to support the annexation. When it was brand new and no potholes and shiny and wonderful, that's one thing, but now the folks that live there are likely realizing that as that thing ages, that is going to become enormously expensive. And it is a risk we've already experienced here in the city of Cottonwood Heights, that when any entity, we've had it happen with a developer, but it could happen, as I understand it, with an HOA, if they fail to pay taxes on this roadway over a 7-year period of time, by default, it becomes the ownership of the city. This is a huge financial liability
So,
for Cottonwood
so,
Heights.
so that's partially true. So it's in that, yes, the city could own it, that the law as it exists now says that the residents still have to maintain it. So just like the street at the end of Prospector, even though we own a private access easement, they have to maintain it.
And I will say that I get calls regularly from the 6 or 7 residents who live on Timberline. That's what I assume you're referring
Yes.
to. That by default, it came to be owned by the city. And these residents feel that, that when they bought their homes, they looked on the website, it showed it was owned by the city, which in their mind meant that the city would maintain it. And so they are constantly contacting me saying, why is the city not maintaining a road that they own? So
this would be different in a couple of ways, since the HOA currently collects money to maintain the road.
but if they've been dissolved, they're not even recognized as from the Utah Department of Commerce.
So.
No longer recognizes them, which, doesn't mean that they are insolvent or anything like that. But on the other hand, it gives me pause, if they want to volunteer and show us that they are financially robust. But again, I think that roadway, the little bit of tax revenues that would come in each year, approximately 100 to 150,000, would be a drop in the bucket if Cottonwood Heights found itself in a position to have to maintain that roadway.
Can I ask a quick question? Tim and Mike, are there any guarantees or things we could do to help alleviate some of these concerns, or is it kind of left up to what, because I get what
Well, if
Ellen
I
is
may-
saying.
And if I may, Councilman Holton, I have talked to our city attorney, Shane Topham, about this. And he has indicated that this is a policy, that if we today annex the Tavachi into our city, and we as a body say, we are not going to maintain that road, that is a policy decision that this body is taking on. If in 6 years from now or 8 years from now, there's a new group of elected representatives, the majority of whom say, we're really sympathetic, let's go ahead and do it. It is, according to our city lawyer, it is a possibility that it could. He did not see a way to ironclad a contract that would protect the city financially.
Yeah, because and in my years, this happens where you have private or original developments that have private roads. Anytime a group of residents or HOA or whatever can come and petition the city for that. I've seen that many, many times.
Yeah, we've seen it.
So yeah, that's correct. The one thing, so it's a policy decision. That's the bottom line. It's a policy decision now on whether you want to annex it or not. But right now, as it stands, it's private and there's no obligation to do that. The second thing is my understanding, and I'll verify this, but I believe this is correct. If the HOA stops paying their taxes and it goes into a tax sale, that tax sale is administered by the county and it would go to the county. We would also probably have to make a decision whether we would accept that as part of the city as well. It would be a county-owned
That's if we
property.
do not annex.
Well, I would need to verify that, but we don't, my understanding is that tax sale, it's part of the county and it would become county-owned property, and then they typically will deed that over to cities. The question is whether we would have to accept that deed. My understanding is we would have to either accept or not accept it. And I'll verify that with our city attorney, but I just want to make sure that was clear. It doesn't automatically revert to the city.
We
once
would
it's on
actually
the tax
maybe
sale.
have a decision to say, no, we're
Yeah.
not going to.
And I'll verify that, but I think that's
And why
correct.
is that different from the Timberline situation?
Because in the Timberline situation, it did become county property. And then as part of my understanding, as part of the process of when we became a city, they made a decision to turn over those properties that were county-owned properties to the city, and we accepted those.
I see.
I don't think you're required to accept them, but that's what I'll verify with our city attorney.
I mean, and the hard thing is we're making certain assumptions of what may or may not happen, which is, where I grew up, there was, right around the corner from my house, it's called Kerrigan Canyon, and it's a private road in Salt Lake City, and they were part of the city, and that road has been a private road that's been maintained by the HOA there for 40 years. I mean, it's hard to know. This could end up being something that is, they manage their affairs. They end up putting revenue into the city. They become engaged, active citizens as part of our community. Or to Ellen, your point, potentially something different. And it's
Well,
hard to know. And
I would certainly say to all the residents that live up there that we welcome them to all of our activities, Butlerville days, everything we do. They are welcome to come. They're welcome to contribute to our community. In the many years I lived here in Cottonwood Heights before we were an incorporated city, I felt a complete sense of belonging in Cottonwood Heights, even though we were not an incorporated city. So I think it's lovely sentiment that they are saying that they would suddenly feel part of the city if they were annexed in. For me, the handful of homes up there, they're welcome to feel a part, and I'm looking out for the other many thousands of people who could possibly, not likely, but could possibly end up with the burden of a roadway that is very unique. I mean, it has bridges, it has many components that make it very unique from an average road on grade. That's how I see it. And this is not just Ellen. I am getting dozens of
Sure.
constituents who have followed this all very closely for the last 15 years. And they are telling me in no uncertain terms and for many reasons, do not annex this.
And is there a reason mostly due to the financial cost of maintaining that road?
The potential liability to have to, yes, the potential financial liability is their key concern.
So if you'll communicate to him as soon as possible when you find out that, whether or not, because that could play really
Yeah.
in where we go.
Can I ask a question of Chief Russo?
Yes,
Policing up there. Well, we talked just very briefly about if there's a natural disaster and you have to, I mean, how do you get there if the bridge collapses and you can't get up there? Is the county better equipped because they already service the canyons to take care of that area than we are as a city? No, okay.
no, if there's a problem there, if the county can't get up, we can't get up either. Neither one of us can. If there's a problem,
So there's no
Yeah.
specific.
the secondary access
And
is,
then
If there is a problem there, chief, who would be the first to get up there? Would they rely on us since we're closer, or how does that work?
well, with fire, they have this interlocal agreement, and so they send the closest unit available.
What about a 911 call?
But a police call is different. That area is unincorporated. So it's the sheriff's responsibility, and with the separation and departure of UPD, Sheriff Rivera can no longer count on Mill Creek or Holiday cars or Midvale cars to go up there. She doesn't have control over them. The closest car is me, and we won't go up there because it's not our area, it's not our
So if
city.
they did call 911, where would be the closest sheriff department?
It
Wherever they are.
could be White City, it could be Kearns, it could be the Canyon cars if they're on
Wow.
duty, but they go off duty at 2 a.m.
I mean, that's pretty
That's fun.
scary. if
It's
you're
not
one of
just
those
the 911 call, sir. It's the proactive. Who's gonna, no one tries to prevent crime, right?
The,
Interesting.
if you, one of the reasons that the Cottonwood Heights Police Department was formed was the last straw came from an armed robbery call. It took 50 minutes for UPD to.
Well, frankly, if I'm one of those family and that happens, I mean, how long are you waiting?
You know,
That's anyway.
anyway, yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah,
And Shane's kind of had an emergency. That's why he's not here as well. He may be coming, but that's why we don't have Shane.
So public comment is happening tonight.
tonight.
Yes.
Chief River might want to chime in on this too, but in addition to that, even if there's a fire call there, very often we work together. If they have a violent domestic, they don't go, that someone's injured, they don't go in until we go in there and secure that scene. They stage, right?
Yeah, we would wait.
And what if you have a cardiac full arrest or an overdose? Same thing. And very often, because it's in the middle of the night and they have to get dressed and get up there. We are the first ones there performing CPR or life-saving measures. And so it's not just somebody breaking into my home. There are other issues that this affects. So unless you can work out a deal where Sheriff Rivera wants to work something out with you on us providing service, I'm not sure that we've ever done that as a city before. So that certainly concerning, right? So,
Yeah. So anything else we want to add?
No, just next steps, discuss among the council, and we'll take public hearing tonight, and then at some point, a final decision, but that's kind of up to your discretion.
Maybe one last thing to add to the matter is, you know, the legislature obviously has a bill going that it probably wouldn't apply to Tabachi specifically, but is looking at all unincorporated areas that are surrounded by cities that are gonna require annexation.
So it would be an automatic annexation into the city with the larger population. But when I talked to Representative Tusher, he definitely made a carve out for these peninsulas, but the spirit of it is they're wanting to get rid of these little pockets.
Exactly.
Period. That is the purpose of going down that path.
I thought there was a 3-year time where those, like the area
Three-
south of
there
Lee
is.
could actually come into
You're right,
contact
spot
instead
on.
of Sandy.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then even after the 3-year period, the larger municipality and the smaller municipality could both do a resolution or whatever we would call it to say, we want it. And if they both agree, it can go to the smaller municipality if there's agreement,
And typically arm wrestling is the best mode of that.
which with this mayor, we're good. We're good to go.
Well,
So,
hopefully the citizens of the area have a say. That's-
yeah, so
that's my
they would
hope.
give them those 3 years to try to petition whatever city they want to join and get that done.
Because we have some other areas that are, I think, south of you in District 4 that are adjacent to the city that could possibly come our direction too.
So,
There's a bunch along Creek Road.
I mean, let's
well, they're already
annex,
built out, yeah.
let's annex something else that doesn't have so much liability.
I-
I'm just
right.
thinking out of the box.
I
here.
agree with you.
But if that's adopted, yeah, there'll be opportunities for plenty of conversations with.
Okay.
It kind of flew through the House. It's on their 3rd reading. I think it will pass. But we'll see.
Well, I mean, one of the advantages could be for Cottonwood Heights, especially the annexation opportunities on the south side of Creek Road to help solve some of the danger on Creek Road. If we own both sides of Creek Road, we could get a lot more done, I think, a lot quicker than our current situation.
Yeah.
And they have private lanes south there, but they're, you know, it's not a bridge and it's, to your point, it's on grade. It's very different level of liability risk.
So good. So we'll wait for your answer, because I think that would play a big part.
Yeah, I may even have it tonight, definitely before you have to make a decision, you know, a legislative decision, I'll have that. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, item 3B is an update from the basically planning commission. We requested of the planning commission to work on an outdoor surface ordinance. And they have done so under the direction of Mike Johnson from the Community and Economic Development Department. And they have come back with some recommendations, it sounds like. So Mike, so basically I wanted to add as well, I actually watched the 2-hour meeting that they had, every minute of that. And boy, I was really impressed that the great job that they did in collaborating and talking with each other and coming to, you know, there was points when I didn't know if they would even get something done, but they did. And so I want to thank them publicly for the work that they did. And Mike, I'll let you tell us what they came up with.
Yeah.
Can I note that I listened to most of the other meetings as well,
Yeah.
and it was very spirited and.
Yeah,
very
I also
sincere.
observed it and listened in, and I agree. There was a lot of deliberation on this and really appreciate all their minds coming
Yeah.
together on this.
Well, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Council. Just a quick refresher on how we came to this point, why we're working on this ordinance. Back in September of 23, there were some public comments made that focused on a specific pickleball court being built in a residential area, and some of the concerns surrounding, in general, the construction of residential pickleball courts as the sport continues to rise in popularity. We see it going more from public facilities into private residential settings. So the council took a vote back in September, and approved a moratorium, which basically puts a hold on the issuance of any sport court permits, for up to 6 months. That 6 months is up in March 2024. If there's not a decision made by March 2024, then that moratorium just lifts, and the council can still work to get an ordinance in place. So that's just the rough goal. Immediately staff started working on an ordinance, and, based on the concerns that were out there and the different approaches to regulate the potential concerns generated from these courts, there were 100 different directions you could go with an ordinance. We had some initial feedback from the commission and the council, and I think this is important. We were kind of directed to avoid regulating pickleball specifically, and not to outright prohibit it. In other words, don't make it a use issue, make it the structure of the court, an actual physical structure matter, rather than singling out pickleball. And there were some good points brought up of, hey, it's pickleball today, what is it 5 years from now? Is it short-sighted to just call out pickleball specifically? And then we talked about the importance of permits and signed affidavits acknowledging the various rules and regulations that apply. So given that, the staff presented a draft to the Planning Commission. That's what this is on the screen. This is not where it is today, but I think the context is important of where we started with this and then where it ended up. The draft presented proposed to regulate all outdoor sport courts over 500 square feet. So that wasn't singling out pickleball, but it was focusing more on paving and things like that were used for athletic or sports activity over 500 square feet. What that draft proposed was to require a permit for the court lighting and fencing. As an aside, lighting and fencing already has standards in the code. We're not really modifying those things at all. We feel like both of those are in a good place. We've seen some issues in practice of people building lighting or fencing without going through the proper channels to get permits and approval, but that's an enforcement issue, and that just happens. But our ordinances for fencing and lighting are good. We're not proposing any changes there. So the draft was really focusing on the courts, which don't today require any sort of permits because they're not, enclosed structures. And then in addition to requiring a permit for those courts, we were proposing to require a signed affidavit, basically acknowledging the noise regulations and the potential implications of violating the noise ordinances. This statement will apply to the new draft as well, but the noise ordinances already exist today. The affidavit is an extra measure of basically an opportunity to make sure that before someone invests in building a pickleball court or a sports court that large, which can be tens of thousands of dollars, that they are aware there are certain ordinances in place that they would need to follow after the court is built. The other thing, and then that affidavit is required to be recorded against the title of the property. So that would pull in a title search if there was a sale of a home or anything like that. So then those standards functionally, they'd pull up and the new owner would be made aware of the same ordinances. And then the proposal was based on a lot of research on the noise impacts of different sport court activities without any mitigation. If you just had a flat surface court, to get down to the decibel levels that are in an acceptable range, if it's flat with nothing else, you potentially need 200 feet of separation. So our ordinance says without any mitigation, we proposed 150-foot setback from property lines, which doesn't work at a lot of places in the city. So to offer some sort of flexibility there was a proposal to accept a sound analysis based on how you were planning to use that court. And if you propose some level of mitigation to mitigate the sound, then you could reduce that setback down to 0 if you could mitigate the sound enough. And that was going to be, a context sensitive. Some people have trees that help mitigate sound, some don't. So that would have been a lot by lot issue. But that's where it was. There was a lot of different opinions on the Planning Commission and even in the public comments. So this was talked about, tweaked and modified, and we explored a number of different things over 3 or 4 Planning Commission work sessions and public hearings. And then at the last public hearing, they kind of rolled up their sleeves and kind of said, let's figure this out. Like you all said, it was a really collaborative process where they all listened to each other and tried to understand each other's perspectives. And I'd say there was a lot of compromise and even good ideas called out by some of the other staff that were, you kind of hear the planning commission go down a train of thought and try to summarize, okay, what we're hearing is this. So our staff did a great job of that as well. Where they landed, and this will be the draft that it's being drafted right now, but will be considered or proposed for consideration by the council, is the ordinance will be applicable to all, we'll finesse this term, but any outdoor non-building structure over 500 square feet. I think the point was raised of if a sport court generates noise, what if I have a 500 square foot dog run? And we're not going to regulate that the same as we are sport courts, even though, if you put dogs in a paved area that big, that's likely to create a noise issue as well. So there were some concerns about the equity of the application and how it applies. The kind of compromise there was, let's make this ordinance applicable to any outdoor kind of paved surface that's over 500 square feet. Staying with the requirement to require a building permit for those structures, which is a change from today. That's an extra step from today.
So I've asked Mike, do you want to get through this before we do questions?
It's up to you.
So what type of impact would that have on staff? With that step?
Not a ton. We review every permit for, if you get a water heater and air conditioner, it has to come through permitting. I don't see this as being as prevalent as even something like that. The review based on this draft ordinance, the review is pretty straightforward. So we would have an affidavit that we'll draft up that becomes kind of a template. And basically we have this for accessory dwelling units today. And if someone's building a second kitchen in their home. So we have a similar mechanism in place for different permits today. We would just apply that here.
Okay.
And the building permit would also require that they submit lighting and fencing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so they'd have to show all that. Lighting already requires permits. Fencing up to 6 feet on property lines is permitted. You can go do that today without a permit. If you go over 6 feet, then there are different steps you need to go through to get approval. So your standard, a 10-foot sport court fence, if it's on the property line, would need to go through a permit approval process today already. So this would just require a permit for that actual surface, along with a signed affidavit that we would work with Shane to get drafted that basically, again, focuses on, hey, however you're going to use this, be aware of these standards. They're subject to enforcement. By signing this, you're acknowledging you understand that. It recorded with the county recorder against that property. We've eliminated, based on the commission's recommendation, any requirement for a noise study. There were some concerns and rightly so that a noise study before the noise is being made is kind of theoretical. Hard to predict that. It becomes, you try your best. We compared it to traffic studies, which the concept is similar. You have a development that's not built yet and you try to project how much traffic is going to be generated. But that's been eliminated. And I think that makes it a more simple process. And then they agreed and kind of went with the same minimum setbacks as accessory structures today, which typically is 3 to 5 feet from property lines. There are weird exceptions to that if there are easements and things like that, but in general, it's within that 3 to 5 foot range from property lines. They also recommended, and this is really just a recommendation because this is outside of their kind of land use purview, but they suggested that the council consider adding a specific line item to our list of nuisances in our nuisance code, that noise violations, exceeding health department limits is considered a nuisance, which again is already in code. It's enforceable today. It just helps make that crystal clear that noise violations are an issue. They can be enforced. So that is, that's where we ended up with the draft, and the commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of this, which I wouldn't have guessed when this process started that there'd be any unanimous vote for anything just based on the discussion. We will prepare all the minutes and the public comments we've received and get that to the council as soon as they're ready. There were a number of public comments that were received through this process, so we'll make sure you have that before you make any decision. So we're here to get council input on this kind of updated draft or this direction. And then maybe at the next meeting, we'll schedule this for public hearing with the council, and then that will lead into a final decision. Okay, questions?
I've got a couple
Yeah,
comments, but
questions.
Go first.
I definitely see a scenario where we get people to sign these affidavits. And I can already see members of the community reaching out and saying, hey, they signed this affidavit, they're doing this, why are you not enforcing? Because I do think at the end of the day, it comes down to enforcement. But I guess the message I want to share with the residents here in Cottonwood Heights is there's so many things happening in our city. And I think the spirit of this is trying to enforce some sort of respectful nature between neighbor and neighbor, right? And, you know, I used to go play basketball every day after school for about an hour with my dad or my friends. And that is a very reasonable, normal approach to playing in your yard that I think most neighbors are respectful of. And I think that even if there's a family that's playing pickleball for an hour a day, I think most neighbors should be respectful that everyone has a different lifestyle and we need to all figure out how to live together. But there are those instances where they might be playing for a 10-hour period of time on a daily basis. And obviously that's going to reach a level that maybe is not reasonable. And so, you know, at the end of the day, I guess I just want to, because I do have folks that have reached out and that are in favor of making pickleball activities completely illegal. And I see both sides here, and I just want to emphasize we've got to all figure out how to be respectful of each other's behavior. And there are going to be things that are unreasonable. Enforcement's going to be hard. But if they are playing for 10 hours a day, like I think you've got some folks that are pretty excessive, I think enforcement might
Three
be
in the morning and four.
might be a little easier than just the occasional they're playing for a couple hours, because frankly, from what I understand, even at the current levels, if a family played pickleball for an hour, it's still over the allowed decibel range. And I am not in favor, and I would encourage our code enforcement to not go after those types of people. That is not, I think, appropriate. Because then it's a question of, is it illegal or not? And if we want to have that discussion, we can have it. But if the spirit is more what's excessive and making the best judgment call from code enforcement of what is being excessive, I completely am supportive of trying to inform residents and giving them a notice saying, this is completely excessive and unreasonable. Here's a warning. And if they keep doing it, they're going to get fined. But those people that are just doing it occasionally and having a great time with their family, I don't want to create an environment where we're starting to crack down on those types of people. I don't think that builds community in my mind.
Well, one of the things that maybe just add to what you said is, you know, the way that enforcement would work, we wouldn't go around trying to
Yeah.
listen for pickleball, people playing pickleball. We would entertain, you know, somebody calling saying, hey, this is a nuisance, can you come check it out? We'd send ordinance enforcement out. And if they couldn't, you know.
And I guess that's my encouragement is that we don't, as neighbors, we're not, the first time they're playing, we're just calling right away. I hope we don't create an environment like that, is all.
So part of the reason this has come up is it's an unfortunate placement. And because of where this pickleball court is, there is going to be excessive noise, even if it's 1 or 2 hours a day. I have another neighbor who wants to put 2 pickleball courts in. So to your point, there is a level of respect, but we need, if
Both
we're gonna
ways,
have an
for sure.
enforcement, and if we're gonna have an ordinance, we ought to have a mechanism to enforce it, because if it is creating a nuisance for one person, whereas somebody else might be tolerant, it's still a nuisance to that person. So one of my questions is, how do you enforce a noise ordinance? Do you get, as Mike Shelton suggested, you get a little meter from Amazon and you have to take a video of how loud this is, and that's what you have to submit to enforcement to show that there's a noise nuisance? How do I give my neighbors the ability, when it does become excessive, to actually ask for help?
Yeah, they would have to call the city and our code enforcement and say, hey, you know, can you come out and measure the sound? That's
And
all.
so they have to be there
They
when the
would have
sound
to
is
be there.
happening.
They wouldn't be able to take a video.
Yeah, I mean,
and
that,
try to-
absolutely, that would happen. I mean, that would have to happen. And let's say they get there. This is a total assumption of what code enforcement would do. But let's say they get there and the activity is stopped. It doesn't prevent code enforcement from just giving a kind reminder. There's obviously to go and find somebody, I think you definitely have to be there and you gotta make sure that it is a proper violation. But I just, I was thinking about this on my drive here and, you know, we're wanting to build a community where we can all get along. And I just hope that those people that aren't being excessive, there can be some understanding to them and their activity. But in your instance, which I know there has been some excessive players, I do think that it will be easier to capture those as code enforcement goes out. If they're doing it that often, they can catch up.
As code enforcement, I mean, they're the ones that have to make that judgment call, but
Yeah,
that,
So there's
Right.
a couple of things.
That's
right
true.
then. That's kind of how it's
we're
structured.
asking the code enforcement officer to make that judgment call, whether somebody's being neighborly or not.
We receive a complaint, we go out and investigate
Take
whether
care of
it is
regular
occurring or
noise.
not. And that investigation would have to be an evaluation of the sound. And typically, and Chief Russo, you can add to this, typically, there is a warning and a conversation with the owner, but if it's a continual issue, there will most likely be citation. If we investigate and we determine that they are violating the ordinance, that will occur. Am I correct in, did I miss anything
We've
on that?
adopted the health department standards and they have a division in the health department actually enforces these things and have specialized meters that measure it from different places and we can do that. That said, you know, we can certainly have our own decibel meters and test the sound, but a good rule of thumb is if the noise is leaving the property line, it's too loud. And certainly anytime after 10 o'clock or late at night or something.
Yeah.
Warnings are few and far between, because it's no different than playing loud music and keeping people up or anything like that. So we may do a warning, but certainly the officer's discretion, and part of that has to do with the reception they get when they go to the house and if we've been there before.
So I'd like to just go on the record, and say I actually really appreciate this level of compromise. But I also think we have to have the will then, as a city, to defend our neighbors who are the victims of the nuisance. So it does go both ways.
Yeah, and I guess my only encouragement is, I hope that we're at least reasonable on really having a decent read on what neighbor's behavior is reasonable or not, because again, if it is the first sight of they've been playing for 4 minutes, I'm on the phone calling,
I agree.
then we need to have the discussion of, is it legal at all or not? Because then that's a completely different argument, but that excessive behavior of day after day, hours and hours and hours,
3 hours in the morning.
I think, yeah. And definitely if they're breaking the time limits of before 7 or after 10, regardless of how long they're playing,
Well,
that
that's
shouldn't.
the easy part.
Yeah,
It's-
that's the
it's
easy
other
part.
That's not, even though there's noise, now there's paddles and balls that are being, they're supposed to help mitigate the noise.
Mm.
I want to kind of tell you what that is. Mitigation right now is they've cut the hertz in half, so that ping sound in half, but it only has gone from 85 decibels to 80. So even with some of these things that we hope eventually will create where there's not such a nuisance, it's still a nuisance.
And I do appreciate that the planning commission shifted their focus away from just pickleball as well. I think that was super important.
Yeah, I agree.
But
Well, and I would, you know, as far as going on record on this subject, the subject of noise disturbance comes in many forms. In my neighborhood, it's from barking dogs. And, you know, it's also from very loud vehicles and I've talked many times with the chief about this. It's very difficult when it comes to moving vehicles and all of that. I got just today a comment from a constituent talking about you know, new decibel readers that are being used in cities to read and give immediate citations to vehicles that are outside the decibel level. I guess the point I'm trying to make is both
Yeah.
of your points. I think it's an excellent point. You know, on the one hand, we want to be neighborly, we want to accept things as they change. And then we also know that scientifically, noise actually is deleterious to the organs of the body and the mind. I mean, this is not just, gee, I wish it wasn't noisy. It actually is unhealthy for the people subjected.
But to your point,
To-
dogs and other, there are
Yes.
definitely a lot more things than pickleball.
So I
You can
know.
bring a dog inside, and that was one of the planning commission's comments, is that you can bring a dog inside, you can't bring a pickleball court inside. Although that's happening now too, indoor pickleball courts are becoming, I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't, if you have plenty of money, why not?
Yeah.
But again, I like we all said before Mike gave his presentation and, you know, the minds of the planning commission have rolled this around and around and trying to come up with something that's, you know, lawful and enforceable and all of these things. And so it may not be perfect in, you know, but I feel like we've really given this our all. I know I voted in favor of this moratorium, which was very controversial. I had people say, you're against pickleball. I said, absolutely not. I am all for recreation and everything you talked about. I want to see my neighbors having a good time, you know, so.
Part of growing up.
Yeah, so I really hope that the citizens of Cottonwood Heights can realize that all the many bright minds and hearts in leadership for this city are trying to do the right thing and trying to come up with something that's manageable and enforceable and a little better than it was. So.
Well, let me ask two things. I agree with the recommendations. Two things, give those who are affected some teeth to to ordinance enforcement. Give them a mechanism that if it becomes excessive, that becomes a way that they can mitigate it in some way.
And chief, I
Lighting
think
is
they
the-
call the department, right, chief, and then make a report, yeah.
So lighting and noise, I would ask that. And the second, and to your credit, you wanted to separate this out. We need to address the rental of backyard courts. It is happening. It's becoming more prevalent. That's a totally different neighborly issue to me. If you're renting out your backyard court, not for your own enjoyment, but for somebody else.
Yeah, so I was talking to Mike Shelton up here about that specific topic. I wanted to get his 2 cents on this. Because the commercial activity is a whole nother discussion for sure. And I know that there's no intent to go after the neighborhood grandma that's doing piano lessons, because that's
Right.
commercial activity, but I think the state has kind of made it clear that we're not going after, you know, at-home businesses or people that are selling stuff on eBay or anything like that.
Right.
But does it get to, you know, do you do something where that then starts to be a nuisance, where that business starts to be a nuisance? But then, you know, I do think you would just get a shift to people that they're not doing it for money. They're just not commercial. They would just start doing leagues that are basically free leagues. Point is, people will find a way around that stuff that, you know, I thought if that's on the books and I'm really that dedicated, I'm then just doing it for free. Right? You're not making money off of it, but.
Yeah, because there's a question right now, if, I mean, it's a business activity that's not approved as a home occupation.
Yeah.
So it's illegal now
Mhm.
to.
Yeah,
to do
we
stuff
license
like
home
that.
businesses, and if you're just a home office, you get a license, it doesn't cost you anything.
But most don't get a license for that.
Right, but if there was one that became an issue, there is a pathway, you just come get a license. Now,
You'd
I
be
have
surprised
a
most
business
do,
license
really?
with the city for $0 a year because I conduct my business from home. Yeah.
and if you have a business that has clients coming to your house, say it's an office, you know, some sort of. We've seen, you know, chiropractic at home, we have an at-home tattoo studio.
Preschool.
If you have a
Massage
client coming
at
to your home,
home,
yep, then
yeah.
you, by code, you're supposed to get a conditional use permit. I think today, if there was a commercial enterprise renting out a pickleball court, it would fall under that category. So if it was operating without a license, there is an enforcement mechanism.
And they probably wouldn't get that license, is my guess, or would.
Well, it's a conditional use permit and you have to mitigate a bunch of concerns. So if you had noise mitigation and a ton of parking and things like that, maybe, but that goes through a public process.
Okay.
And that exists.
So you feel like that's already covered?
For that specific instance, yeah, renting out a court as part of your home, that would be a home occupation with clients, as I would define it. And that does require a license today. So operating without a license is enforceable.
So one of the things that I really like about what I think this accomplishes is we're letting people know early that you're signing something saying you're aware that there are noise issues and that so you're recognizing beforehand that there could be issues, which could stop them from building the court if they wanted, or, you know, at least constructing it with things in mind to mitigate the noise. So anyway, I think it does a lot of really good things.
Well, the last thing we want is someone to invest that much money into building a nice sports court and then immediately get that call from code enforcement that they're violating the noise ordinance. So it's meant to protect kind of all parties and make everyone aware, you know, going into it before you do it, hey, this is a thing to be aware of.
Great. So you need our official,
If you're okay with the modifications that have been recommended, we'll put this into a draft ordinance for you and then just plan to schedule this for public hearing on February 20th. Potentially action at the following meeting.
sounds good.
And maybe I should just clarify, are you okay if we add that noise violation language into the nuisance ordinance?
Yes, I am.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
We
you.
have three that agree to that.
Yeah, I'll agree.
I don't know about me. I mean, it's basically not changing it. It's already there, right?
Not listed as a current nuisance. We're adding noise that.
And would that be just following up the county?
Yes.
Just the decibels that the county already has on the
Yeah.
books? I mean, yeah,
It's a repeat for one.
yeah.
Okay, great. So we're gonna move on to item C, which is so if you remember, a few meetings ago, we commissioned Matt Ship and our Public Works Department to get a traffic traffic study done for Fort Union Boulevard. And so that is now completed, and so we're super interested to hear from Matt and tell us what they found out and recommend. So Matt.
Okay, so Mayor and Council, thank you. As you've mentioned, Mayor, y'all asked us to move forward and because Fort Union's been a concern, and as of late, it's kind of hit the spotlight due to some recent incidences that happened on Fort Union. And so as a council, you asked us to go through and look at do a speed study on that because there were questions of raising or lowering the speed limit. Actually, I should take that back. No question of raising it, but questions about lowering the speed limit and what would be a recommendation if we were to do that. So we commissioned a speed study with Avenue Consultants. Originally, we were gonna do between 1300 East and I believe 2300, but during that time, when I was meeting with them, we just decided we would go all the way up to 30th East from the west border of 1300, take it up to 30th East and break this up into segments and get some speed numbers on that. We did the speed study. Just really quickly, the report, November 27th through December 1st. Those were days with no snow. We made sure they were going to do it the week before, but we hit a lot of snow, so we backed off on that. And so we had clear roads on those 4 days, or 4 days we had clear roads. And we ran the test 24 hours on the road. We gathered quite a few points of data, just FYI, a little over 300,000 points of data to determine this. And our consultant used pneumatic tubes. Those are the black tubes you see that go across the road. And what it does, that doesn't only collect speed, it collects vehicle types, timestamps. If we want to go back and do more studies, and we've talked, and one of the reasons I did it this way, because we have talked about town center, and we talked town center, is that, am I using the right term?
Yeah.
Using town center around 2300 and maybe looking at some modifications. This information, if we move to that, will give us volumes of traffic, turning movements, and all of those things. That's a side note. So we have that data, some things we can look at. But as far as the speed, and that's what we focused on this one. In doing the speed study, we took into account context of the area. We followed a UDOT standard. I've kind of listed those in here. We also followed the MUTCD standard as well as sections in the Utah code that kind of dictate a few things and determining that. Each one of those segments are laid out 13 to 17, 17 to Highland, Highland to 23, 23, 27, 27 to 30th. And doing that study, one of the things we did is we took out any speeds less than 30 miles an hour. We tossed those out. And the reason for that, we assumed anything less than that, you have a traffic jam, if you will. Cars aren't really, when you figure out speed, you try to use free flow movement. Anything less than that on a road that's 40 miles an hour, you can kind of assume you got a little backup. You're just starting out from a stop at a red light. So there's a few things that are happening there. So we took those and pushed those out. And the results are on that. We found, and I'll lay these out, segment 1, which is 13 to 17, the 85th percentile was 42. The next segment was 43, the following was 39, and then 45 and 45 respectively. The higher 85th percentiles were when you got from 2300 going to the east. Those kind of picked up speed, which tends to make a little sense because we have less drive approaches on those sections of road. If you go down to the other end, you got businesses, a lot of drive approaches, feels a little more crowded, if you will. A lot of activities going on around in your brain when you're driving that. So going through that, bottom line, our 85th percentile, and also I'm just talking about 85th percentile now. Our 85th percentile falls within the standard of not necessarily needing to adjust the speed limit. So anything 5 miles above or 5 miles below, anything in that range, your speed limit is set pretty well, if you will, for what's happening. Now, the recommendation from the consultant is we don't need to adjust the speed limit, but if we want to affect the speed limit, the traffic, we need to look at more traffic calming redesigns or adding some features that would slow that traffic down. That's the report. Those are the numbers that we have. Now, also, as a council, you asked the question, well, what can we do? Well, this is where we're bringing it to you now. These are the numbers, and this is what it is. As a council, you can have this discussion and decide, do we want to lower the speed limit? You can, and I will let Shane, if he wants to speak in here, but we've talked about this before. You can, as a council, lower your speed limit. You have a range between 25 and 55, I believe, in the state code, that you can make adjustments as long as you don't go over 55 and you don't go under 25 unless it's a school zone. You can make some adjustments in there. The recommendation, and I tend to agree without doing some road modifications, the recommendation is to leave the speed limit as it's posted. Or, you know, you can look at lowering it to 35 if you'd like, but anything more drastic than that, what I believe is going to happen, I don't know if you're going to change driver behavior just from a speed limit sign. So with that, that's the gist of the report. I believe you all have the report. And you can see in there the volumes. You can see where the volumes along the road, big, heavy volumes. And as you go further east, makes sense when you get towards the homes, your volumes drop off to around 8,000 ADT average daily trips. So I'll leave it at that and answer any questions and then open it up, I guess, for discussion there.
There's just one thing that stands out. It's this crash data summary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I kind of bounced over that. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. 2023. So it was 106 crashes in 2022. Went down. What were you pointing to?
No, 2023 though has not,
Complete data.
Okay.
is an incomplete.
Okay, I was gonna
data.
say that is what happened.
Yeah, that was impressive, right? No, 2023 has incomplete data. They made a statement, I forget where it is, but
That's
they
what you're
did say
pointing
it. The page before,
Thank you.
yeah, on the page before 2023 crash data is currently incomplete and may not be fully validated. So, the crash data, what we tried to do is define which ones were speed related. And you can see that on their speed related crashes were 15. Total crashes were 392 over a 4 year period. If we take that data, and this is coming off the state, and Chief Russo can explain how they get our data if you'd like to go through that. But the speed related crashes were around 15. As far as severe crashes, There, we're stating 0, in other words, speed related. No severe. Now, one of the things about speed related. It also takes into account winter conditions. So if you have a fender bender and you're doing 10 miles an hour. And you slid on this or that's a speed related condition. Now, I'm not saying all 15 of these are snow related, but that's a speed related condition because you're driving too fast for the conditions.
Which would play into the, it not being severe.
Severities,
Yeah.
yes.
And Chief Russo and I have talked about this. It would be good to have him clarify a little bit on that.
Yeah, and interesting enough, I mean, we did not compare notes before this, but he's right on. And in the accidents that we've had and the serious accidents we've had, and the ones that you're aware of, not a single one can we attribute to speed as the primary contributor. Now, when you get the number from the state and they give them to you like that, Mark Twain says there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So keep in mind that Mr. Ship is correct when they're reported as speed-related accidents, but I had Candy, because I was worried about this, pull the data on our accidents, and I think she has it on our presentation to show you how many of those are actually just exactly what you talked about. And that is, you're coming down Butler Hill, it's a snowy day, and you hit your brakes. And I myself going down my street, and it's like, oh, no. And you bump the car ahead of you. That's an accident, and the officer will report it as prime contributor speed. Not that they were doing 90 miles an hour, it's speed too fast for conditions, but it's classified in that same data. So he might have been doing 10 or 15 miles an hour, still, that's too fast given the data. So just keep that in mind when you're assessing that information, that it's always that speed is issue. The speed problem can be, and it's usually on those cases where they're reckless driving or DUIs or something. That's the primary contributor. Their speed is actually secondary to, what the primary contributor is. So I hope that helps.
Fascinating.
Mayor, if I may. The report does, like I said, recommends that we want to control behavior. We need to look at barriers, and I'm calling everything a barrier. Traffic control, chicanes, bump outs, different types of road conditions. Islands, medians, the whole treatment. So I'm just going to call them barriers or visual barriers. That's how you control the speed. It's one of the things we can look at, and as we talk about town center, it's probably a good place where we can start looking at doing some things that would and run, if you will, test programs. I'm not going to say I know what those are right now because I don't. Running a test program in the winter is a little difficult because of the conditions. If you put out there like pylons or try to create these barriers, the issue in the winter is we're going to plow them over or they're going to get pushed around. But we put them up in good weather conditions and see how they do on speed, run the test again, see what we come up with. It may be a good opportunity to try a few things that are fairly low cost to see what that does for us. Like I said, I don't have that right now. I'm not going to state I know what it is, but I'm going to say we should, if we're wanting to lower these speeds, we need to force the speed to be lowered by the barriers. I don't, so that's, I'll leave it at that and let you guys.
We've heard consistently, people drive as fast as they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And if you narrow a road or however you change how they see that, the safety of how fast they can drive, people slow down. That they don't, it's not a posted speed limit that people are looking at. It's how safe they feel driving that fast. But
No, I was just gonna say, I think the crux of all of this, why we did this in the first place is there were some pretty, tragic accidents that happened this last year. And, just getting to the bottom of that, Chief, if I'm correct, the majority, if not all, had someone driving under the influence. Is that correct? Am I wrong?
The majority of them.
so 5 of 7 severe accidents were included impaired drivers since I've been elected.
And so if we're really focusing on trying to prevent those, I mean, an impaired driver, Matt, whatever you do as far as barriers or anything, it's irrelevant to that impaired driver. And so how, again, if we're wanting to get to the kind of the bottom line, how do we prevent that? And obviously that's police.
Well,
I'll give you,
Yeah.
sorry, and then Councilmember Brown, I'll give you an even scarier thought. Is since the pandemic, Utah is #1 in the state in increased
In the
DUIs
nation.
in the nation. We are increasing DUIs at a faster rate than every other state in the country.
Because to me, that is the bottom line.
and that's all the more reason that we slow our roads down. Whether you're impaired or you're not impaired, people suffer less when cars are moving more slowly.
I understand, but how do we, the crux of it, the bottom line? Driving under the influence at that point, I've never driven under the influence, thankfully. I don't think they're they're probably not paying attention to anything that's happening. They're kind of in another mindset. And so at the end of the day, that is, how do you get to the bottom of that? Regardless
Well,
regardless of other traffic patterns, that's my specific question. And that's not to diminish any of the traffic calming or anything else. I'm just trying to understand, how do we, as a city, address people that are driving under the influence so we can tell our residents who are on the road that we're doing something about those instances?
That's a very fair point, because then remember, we've changed. So what's the number that I put out last time? 40 or 50% of our accidents or DUIs are not even alcohol anymore. I mean, so if someone is gonna use opiates to get behind the wheel of a car or go drinking when you can take an Uber, they're already, they have no regard for anyone's public safety or respect for other people. So it doesn't matter what number you put out there. They're gonna, then it doesn't matter. They're just gonna go and they lose their peripheral vision, they lose their judgment, and they will do what they do. And the result is death or serious injury and property damage. So is that your question?
Yeah, and how do we, Chief,
We very aggressively, we're doing that.
This is, don't want to steal your thunder. We get our officers, which I know Chief is doing, to search and find every single one of them. And so much so that
gotta
people
get them
know
off the road.
if they drive in Cottonwood Heights impaired, there's a chance, the high chance that they're gonna get caught.
Because in my opinion, they have no business being on that road,
Well,
period.
I think the mayor brings up a good point. We have to get a reputation in Cottonwood Heights that we do not tolerate certain types of behavior. I will tell you, in my district, what my district residents are subject to is SR 190 and SR 210, where you ask somebody who's a motorcyclist, they know in their circles, if you want to do stunts and tricks and drive fast and go through Cottonwood Heights on SR 190 and SR 210, you can do it. And I no disrespectfulness to the Cottonwood Heights Police Department. But, you know, I love the idea of enforcement. Enforcement is extremely expensive. And I think that coming up with the visual, you know, I don't think we can enforce our way out of this. We have got to slow vehicles down. We've got to support, and we have. I voted in favor of more police traffic officers. I mean, yes, let's do all we can. And we want to get that reputation that if you want to just go driving through, don't go to Cottonwood Heights. And I'd like them to think of that as in speed as well. Gee, if I need to get east to west, I'm either going to get on I-215. Oh, I'm not going to get on Fort Union, man. That place is slow. I think it's only for people that want to patronize local businesses. That would be wonderful for our local businesses. And the people that just want to drive through there to get somewhere, get on I-215. That's where you drive 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 miles an hour, not through Cottonwood Heights. I want that reputation in Cottonwood Heights.
Well, and you're gonna see in about an hour and a half roughly, you're going to see what is happening based on adding the 3 additional officers and our proactive enforcement on this. You're going to see statistics that's addressing this element that we're talking about.
Awesome.
And I'll tell you that before they were defunded, we had the reputation, we checked with Highway Patrol, that I don't know that anyone in the state did more DUIs per capita than us. And for years, literally years, we didn't have a single fatality or even a serious injury related to an impaired driver. And then they went away and you saw what happened. Enforcement is expensive, but probably being on the other end of it.
But it's important
That's
because
more
it's all
expensive.
about, you don't know if you just stopped that person that's impaired, what would have happened in the next hundreds of feet, right? And you hopefully you get it as soon as you can before they end up killing somebody.
That's exactly right.
I like that we have this study to inform what's happening with town center. I think that those recommendations are coming soon. I think it might be prudent to wait to see what that is and if there's going to be some traffic calming incorporated in that. I guess what I'm saying is I don't feel the need to adjust the speeds right now until we see what could be happening with the town center.
I think our efforts, would be better served exactly what you said in looking at where we can change, slowing speeds. Or change how the design versus, speed limits. I agree with you.
If I could add one thing,
Yes.
just from a planning standpoint, setting aside the importance of enforcement and that thing, that whole conversation, our Fort Union Boulevard master plan, separate of speed and slowing down traffic, does recommend a lot of those design improvements in an effort to make Fort Union Boulevard give it more of an identity, a community road, especially in front of the town center area. So there are some of those design recommendations that come from that adopted policy that could be considered by the council as well as we get into the town center master plan project. But certainly that master plan does have recommendations for roadway redesign from a community building and placemaking standpoint, even separate from speed and danger.
Well, and I would like to respectfully to Councilmember Highland. The Fort Union Boulevard Master Plan was adopted in 2017. Very little of the complete street recommendations made in that plan have ever been implemented. And so I would actually disagree in terms of, I would like to see where it's near Montview Park, where it's near Bella Vista Elementary, where we know there to be, people crossing to get to Whitmore Library. In these areas, I would like to see the council accelerate a focus, especially when we know in the year of 2024, we have grant opportunities. We have grant opportunities, one's at the end of this month related to active transportation, which of course, safety for all users is part of that. And so I think we should, as a council, prioritize complete street aspects and have grants written and ready to go so that when, for instance, the one this month and all the SS4A grant opportunities that are coming up, by July, that we're ready to pull the trigger on those. And again, as a council, say near our schools is important, near our parks, and certainly near the city center. So we have, I think, such an opportunity to do something right away. I mean, this is, I think, a really hot issue for a lot of our constituents throughout Cottonwood Heights to calm.
What would you recommend?
I would recommend that we ask the staff to give their maybe top 4 recommendations in the areas near Montview, Vista, maybe Whitmore Library and the new city center, or, and have another deliberation. We don't have time tonight, right? But and try to come up with
we're going to the bidding process, and so we're gonna have a hawk light there, and which is gonna change dynamics.
And that's really important, but I want to always go on record. We must slow the vehicles down well on either side. I mean, it's great to have a flashing light, but when you're moving along in traffic with an average median speed of 40 miles an hour, there's cars that are moving it much more than that, because that's the average median. And so I love the idea of a hawk light, but I don't think it's enough. I think we have to do other measures, and there's a price tag for those. And so the more that, again, we're ready to be able to make grant applications and forward that, there's even grant applications for doing studies and pilot projects. In fact, I'll just say them as quickly as I can. I'd like to see a full-time employee for the city whose focus is their expertise on finding grants and applying for them.
Great. Okay. So have we given you some direction, Matt?
Right now, what I'm hearing is we're gonna
Let's look
hold
at
off
some-
on changing the speed limits,
Let's
and
look
that
at
would have
traffic
been
calming, whatever.
fine,
we
and
can
then
do.
we'll look at some temporary type traffic calmings, to your point of testing different ideas. But like I said, this time of year where we are, testing those ideas is not the best. Because some of those idea testing are like building an island, if you will, with barricades, cones, doing different things like that. It just, and in the winter, that makes it difficult. But as we roll around, we'll come up with some ideas. We'll present them back to you and say, these are some ideas we're thinking about. And we'll run a few test pilots. It'll cost minimal dollars to do that. And then we'll just see where we're going with that.
I really appreciate that suggestion. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, and I don't see this as years. Maybe I'm short-sighted on that, but I'm thinking if we're gonna have recommendations within months, let's incorporate it all together instead of working piecemeal. That was my.
Great. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you all for that discussion. Okay, we're gonna move on to item D. This is a Parks, Trails and Open Space Committee neighborhood bypass or byway discussion. So we've invited let's see, Zach Geiger. Did I say that right, Zach? Yeah, Zach Geiger is the chair of our Parks, Trails and Open Space Committee.
I'm the chair of the active.
Of the Active Transportation
Yeah.
Subcommittee, sorry, I meant to say that. And anyway, and so we're gonna have Mike Johnson and Matt Ship involved in this discussion as well, but we're excited to see. what we
Zach, why
come
don't
up
you
with.
come up and sit here next to Chief?
I just There's all the things along that route.
How are you, Zach?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Well, I showed Zach the presentation just right before the meeting here, so maybe I'll just lead off and then Matt and Zach can jump in if I say something wrong or talk next steps or whatever else, but this kind of idea in this project dates back, I think to November. Matt and I had a meeting with Zach and the Active Transportation Subcommittee on the PTOS committee to talk about ideas for this concept of a neighborhood byway, which is basically a striped and signed, bicycle route through neighborhoods in the city, generally off of the main roads, but in locations that can connect to certain community amenities or locations. And very quickly in that meeting in November, we kind of honed in on the one you see on the screen here, which is from 2700 East over to the Racket Club Drive area. It's actually very similar for anyone that's run the Thanksgiving 5K. It's very similar to that 5K route. But we identified it as a route, and to Zach's credit, he identified it as a route that connects a lot of these locations from the rec center, the schools that are along 2700 East, to Bywater Park, over to Canyon Center, and then potentially across, in the future, across Fort Union Boulevard into the Big Cottonwood Trail and that whole network there. So we kind of agreed in that meeting that we could test this area as a pilot project, test out how neighborhood byways work, lay down some bicycle striping and install some kind of unique community wayfinding signs along this bike route and see how that functions. And then this would be the pilot to then expand that program elsewhere in the city. The idea for striping and signage, these are out of the NACTO design guide for bikeway striping, would be something like you see here, just dashed bicycle lane symbols on the road, but frequent enough that you see them and they're right in the middle of the roadway. And then coupling that with,
Those are right in the middle.
well, in the middle of the travel lane, yep.
These are going through neighborhoods, so
These are
Yeah, this
shared.
You have
picture
so many
doesn't,
lanes.
yeah, maybe a bad example.
Yeah, that
The
doesn't
picture
look
looks
like
like
That's from Boston, that's like on-street
Like,
parking.
where is this?
That is in the middle of a travel lane.
that's just right across
Okay.
the
The
street.
best example I could find of that existing.
I mean, so the whole purpose of this, right, is to get them off of main busy thoroughfares, is that the point?
Yeah.
That
Get them
and
off
also,
Fort Union,
establishing these routes that, this is kind of the other element of it. We would install these are the signs we have on the Big Cottonwood Trail that are on the left there. So they're different than a normal, just like street sign or informational sign. They're branded, they're a little nicer, a little fancier. We would take that sort of design concept and implement the idea on the right there where you have some community locations listed on those signs.
I mean, as you know, in the time that you've served on the council, you've heard people give their testimonies, how they would love to walk or ride their bike, but they feel so unsafe. And so by creating a network of these neighborhood byways, then people can say, oh, well, here is the suggested, and it's not enough to simply leave things completely the way they are. We need to be thinking, where do these neighborhood byways cross a collector and arterial? Do we need more to make those crossings safer? For instance, another thing related to this, if you could go back to the last slide, I feel like Zach Geiger should get to talk.
That one?
So the one that shows the
The
map.
map?
But I will tell you that when I went to the Bywater Park presentation that the CHRC put on recently, I had constituents who live in this area here. And they were explaining to me that when their children want to get to Bywater Park, they don't have a way to safely get across this roadway. And in walking that and really thinking about it, there needs to be a consideration of doing a mid-block crossing somewhere that allows, when you're on the south side of the street, getting safely over to the north side to get into the park. So that again, parents who have children in this area know that even if they walk along the south sidewalk, when they cross to get over toward the north side to get to Bywater, that it's safe. So this is peace of mind for parents to know that they can say to their children, hey, go ahead and get to the park, go ahead and go to school. It ties in with the safe routes to school too. It's really exciting it'll make our safe routes to school even more robust. And it'll also encourage people who have been timid to say, oh, well, Cottonwood Heights has really worked to make it clear that this is a nice, quiet local street that I can get from one place to another. Does that make
I
sense?
love riding my bike, and I am all in favor of trying to figure out paths to get bikes off of Fort Union Boulevard and Highland Drive and these other areas. I think it's a super neat thing, but because one of the complaints that I think I've heard from folks in my area as well is, they want to be respectful to the bike, but Fort Union Boulevard is so crowded. And Frank, we've had some discussions of trying to limit some of those lanes to make ways for bikes. I would much rather not do that and have these byways so people can still get around on a bike without kind of hampering the main thoroughfares that cars go on. It's pretty neat.
It's an easy win too, because this infrastructure is already existing, so we don't have to invest as much to prove this concept. And I think it's gonna be up to the council if this goes forward, as well as us on the active transportation subcommittee to get community feedback and see what people say once we implement this, because I'm hopeful that we'll get positive feedback and then we can eventually implement more of these in the future if it's positive.
Would cost be signs and
Signs and
striping?
paint.
Yeah, the cost on this, now, this particular project, we're gonna incorporate into our striping contract this year. We're letting it, you'll be seeing the contract in a few weeks. We'll be letting this contract and putting this in there. It's a fairly minimal cost. The idea on this one as a pilot, one is to develop the signs and then develop the types of markings that go on the road. So that when someone is on one of these roads and they see this type of marking, they know they're on a byway. I mean, we'd advertise it, it would have its thing going on. But when you see the types of markings that are in the road, you know that perhaps you're on a byway and there's going to be points of interest or access along that route. So it would kind of encourage you to stay on that, but we will pick it up. This one, like I said, will be minimal. When we're done with that, Zach and his crew will come along. They'll get their feedback. They'll get everything that you're looking for to make a decision. And then we'll develop an overall and we'll start looking at these things. Then we're going to be coming back to you and saying, okay, this is the prices that are going to happen, because the painting we're going to use is going to be a little heavier, longer lasting, won't fade as quickly. The signs will be they'll be more expensive than the standard metal sign, but it will be the image we're looking for. I did one of these projects similar to this in Highland, but on trail system, and these signs at all these intersections where people loved them. They could send their children down these trails and say, go to the library, and they would just follow the signs, and it was great. The same concept here. There's a few things we're trying to connect with this one. If I can point out Fort Union. On the other side of Fort Union, we have the new trail that in a couple of years that will be built, the big trail on the north side. Looking at the crosswalk there at Big Cottonwood Canyon Road and right across from Porcupine, looking at that crossing, making that a little more improved. Inviting that neighborhood to go across to Big Cottonwood Trail. So there's a lot of things that this particular one incorporated that we felt was important as a minimal cost again. And recommendation from Zach and his crew. I think this is a win all the way around that we can make this happen. We're gonna start this. This will come about in the next couple of months. When I say because we have the contract, it's gonna be on the striping, but that's what we're
So
doing.
Matt, most of the time when you do a pilot, you're wanting to measure success
Yes,
to decide if you want to continue to do it
Correct.
elsewhere. How are we going to measure that? What's going to be the indicator that says, let's do this
I think,
elsewhere?
and this is the thing, this is interesting, because I can't collect data on something that doesn't exist. Right? I mean, we've gone from 0, and then if 10 people start using it, it's a tenfold increase,
Sure.
if you will. It's hard to measure, so I think what's gonna have to happen is the crew here from Detox is going to need to do some sort of a survey, if you will, even whatever they call that,
Visuals.
some sort of a survey that says, what do you think? And as a city, we're gonna need to advertise, take a look at the new byway standards and what's going on. What do you think? And try to come up with something that would give
See
us
if it's a
an
positive-
indication of a positive.
By the neighborhood.
Right, because right now, like I said, I don't know how many people are going from, let's say, the rec center to Bywater Park. I have no clue
Mhm.
what's happening. I have no clue on the bicyclists. People may not be doing it because they may feel like it's unsafe. Well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna let my kids walk on that. So that's the hard part.
If I may.
Quantitatively, it's gonna be hard to measure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, if I may add into this, one of the things I know the mayor was interested in nearly a year ago is what Bike Walk Provo has done. So I've been studying their plan. They're about 20 years ahead of us in the maturity of a citizen-led program similar to what Zach Geiger and his subcommittee are doing to make Provo more bikeable and walkable. And one of the ways that they answer this question that you just raised, Council Member Holton, about metrics and how do you measure success is once a year, every November, they have what they call a pedestrian count. And they literally reach out in the community and say, please sign up and join us on November 16th. We're going to do our pedestrian counts. And they literally assign residents to go to various corners and they stand and they watch and they count how many pedestrians are using these areas that they have worked to make safer. So there's really exciting things ahead if we organize and we support the subcommittee. And there's already, we don't have to invent wheels. It's quite remarkable what Provo has done. And we can take their models and I think we can implement them to again measure actually, we could do this right away. Those walking to get to Bywater Park, we station people, we do counts. There's all, they have it all figured out every 15 minutes for an hour or something, you do the counts. And so as we improve and make these byways known and accessible and all that, we can literally count that every year and then we can brag about it and, hopefully continue to get the monies to support this sort of thing. Yeah.
So that's what we wanted you to hear what we're doing and where it's going and, give kudos to the subcommittee who's been working very hard and looking at the city overall. So that's where we are.
Great, love it. I would love to see this come to fruition and be successful and help people feel like they could walk and roll as Ellen, in a safe manner through our neighborhoods. Great, thank you. Okay, item E under staff reports is a Danish oak rezone. So Mike, why don't you head us up on this one as well?
Okay, this is a rezone request that we received from a property owner. This has just gone through the planning commission process and rezone applications are considered legislative requests, so they require council consideration and approval. This is a request for a parcel of land. This is a picture of the land. I'll show you an aerial image of it on the next slide. It's just under half an acre. Situated in between, just down the road here, between Bengal and Creek Road, at the end of the Danish Pines subdivision, which is a relatively new subdivision in the city. The request is to rezone it from RR 121, which is a single family zoning that would require half an acre to build a single family lot. And the request is to change that to R 110, which is also a single family zoning, just with a 10,000 square foot minimum lot size. Both the staff and the planning commission have recommended approval of this. Here's the context. This is two side-by-side images. The first one here, you can see this is the Danish Pines subdivision. It's a long cul-de-sac there that Bengal Boulevard is the road on the top. So this is just up the road from
And that's currently R 121.
this is currently R 110, and I'll show you the current zoning here in a minute. You can kind of see the half acre zoning on this parcel is an island. And it's located, it's kind of a landlocked piece that's not directly accessed from this cul-de-sac and is not accessed from the south either. And then in context, this on the right, this property over to the right is the Smith's Shopping Center and 3500 East. You can see where it is. This is the cemetery. So it's just nestled in there along Bengal. Background of this, not that long ago, maybe beginning in 2017 and then continuing through 2019. The property all around this was an old, large kind of farmland estate owned by a family trust. And they sold not all of it, but pieces of it off to Ivory Homes and to another developer, I think Castlewood Builders. And two subdivisions have been developed in the last probably 5 years there. Watson Hollow to the south where that yellow is on the screen, and then Danish Pines to the north. So as of 2019, what you see on the screen was the zoning, but it's not the zoning today. But that is the context for why this little parallelogram shaped parcel exists as an island of half acre zoning. So here you see on the left, the current zoning. The subject parcel is highlighted in a blue outline, and you can see it's kind of in an island of R 110 zoning all around it. The reason for that being when the subdivision and the property was developed to the north and the south, this parcel was not owned by that same family trust. It was a separate owner that was not part of that land transaction and development application. So that parcel just remained there kind of as an island in between the two projects. The current applicant for the rezone owns all three of the parcels there that have a star on them. The request is only for the one, but he owns all three of those. And this is coupled with a request to combine all three of those lots for development of one single family home that would access off of the end of the cul-de-sac there. At the same time, we don't want to see three lots be combined that have two different zoning designations in the same parcel boundaries. So he's requested for the rezone to just kind of clean up the zoning. Staff has reviewed it. It's really minor and it matches all the zoning around it. Most of the parcel that's actually highlighted there is steep hillside, so it wouldn't be developed anyways, but it would become part of the larger parcel that results when you combine the three starred lots. So that's all this is. This went through planning commission hearing. There were a few public comments, mainly just asking questions. But the commission unanimously recommended approval of this one. Again, this would come back for public comment and potentially action in 2 weeks. Any questions on this?
Cool lot.
Right.
Good for them,
I know.
mine. Those are the kind of rezones I actually like, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Makes
Makes
for
sense.
pickleball. Clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, item F. So our last staff report concerns our sustainability priorities. And so we have Ian Harris, who's an associate planner and sustainability analyst with us today, and he and Mike together, I think, are going to give us an update on the sustainability priorities for the city. Hi, Ian.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. You've had a lot on your plate at this meeting, so thank you for having me here to talk about these projects. So I first want to go over some of the ongoing sustainability efforts at the city. You are probably familiar with quite a few of them. The first is our Community Renewable Energy Program. Samantha DeSeelhorst, who preceded me in this role as a sustainability analyst, she's been spearheading our efforts in that program. It's going really well. Our Fort Union Boulevard separated bike lanes are also ongoing, as well as our East Jordan Canal Trail feasibility study on the east end of town. And then our 4 sustainability projects from last year, you'll get a more detailed update with where those projects are at your retreat. But those would be the Mount View Park Pollinator Garden, our community tree sale event that we're holding later this spring, our sustainability ordinance amendments, and improved sustainability communication. So for 2024, we're going to recommend 4 primary projects, and then we have some other options that we've listed on your staff memo and that I'll briefly go over in this presentation as well. And then if you have other ideas, we're always open to hearing those. But I guess I'll just jump right into these 4.
And just for context, these are derived from the Sustainability Action Plan, which was in your packet this week. These projects all come out of the different categories and goals within that plan.
Yeah, and that plan serves as our master sustainability plan at the city. So when we look for ideas for these projects, we try and pull them from that plan and make sure that we get a broad, that the projects address different parts of the interlocal sustainability action plan so that we're not just focusing on one specific thing, but we're touching on all these things that comprise sustainability at the city. So the first suggested project would be a workshop series here at the city. So what this is would be regular public workshops on different sustainability topics, like landscaping is a common one we hear a lot, but people want more information on. Water reduction kind of ties into that, waste management, recycling, consumer information, etc. And these would be kind of educational events and workshops about existing programs and resources, along with helping people discover ways that they can be more sustainable in their lives and how they can benefit from programs that they may be unaware of. This would be a great opportunity to partner with local organizations to assist in these events. There's lots of nonprofits in the Valley, along with like the University of Utah. I think there'd be opportunities to partner with them.
BYU, but yeah.
And are those just held here at City Hall and residents are able to stop in kind of thing?
They could be, that's something we're envisioning. There may also be like existing workshops that we could promote to residents and participate in some way as staff that are not held here.
Workshops.
So
Yeah, got it.
And before we leave this is so marvelous because city code does matter so much. One of the things I'd like the staff to consider is the concept of looking at code to see where we can reduce our disruption of existing natural land. And specifically as it pertains to external ADUs. Right now, from what I can understand of our external ADU code policy, requires residents, should they want to have an external ADU, to build it in a different place within their yard. There's some that are already existing but don't meet certain setbacks, and I'd like to be thinking, why would we disrupt natural, land areas to build on them to meet code that maybe could be looked at again. That's something I'd like to see within this realm.
yeah, I think there could be a good opportunity there to help educate people on ADUs as well. And how to build them in a sustainable way and not disturb natural lands. I think that could be a good option. Again, we hear often from residents that they want to learn more about sustainability and they want to participate in sustainability at the city, but they're not really sure how to do that. So I think that this would be a really good way to engage people.
Another random thought is, this is kind of on topic, but we may want to put something in one of our newsletters about, when you talk about waste management, what you're able to put in certain bins. I don't know if you heard, but this last week there was a recycling truck fire in Mill Creek, from Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling, because somebody decided that putting batteries in a recycling bin was a good idea. But it ended up costing Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling, I mean, a couple $100,000. Because you have to basically rebuild that back part of a truck.
Yeah, and I-
Just, there's those interesting kind of things of, even my wife will have pizza and she's like, can I put this in the box? Because there's pizza grease, some of those things are,
Yeah.
not everyone knows
Right,
the answer
yeah.
to some of these things.
I communicated with Pam about that. We're really fortunate the driver was
Yeah.
safe. That
Yeah.
was a big worry, but we do, Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling does provide some of that information. We give them a regular newsletter section, and they provide that. They have provided that in the past, but that can be re-emphasized.
Anyway,
And Ian helps write a monthly, like a city sustainability article as well. That's a good idea for that. And it's good. Those are topics that can come up year after year as good reminders.
but you just wouldn't think it would cause a fire, right? And yeah.
Yeah, so that's the workshop idea that we have. And that, this kind of ties into what you're saying, Councilmember Holton, an event for hard to recycle products. I think that you guys heard from the Utah Recycling Alliance a few meetings ago.
We did.
Mike and I met with them. It seems like holding an event with the Utah Recycling Alliance is very much within our bandwidth and would be like a minimal cost to the city. They tried to communicate to us that they get so much demand for these kinds of events that they're very eager to partner with the city and hold an event like this. So we wanted to highlight it as one of these projects. We partner with the nonprofit to assist in the promotion and the hosting, and I think there's opportunities to maybe partner with like the people who help us with our shred event, maybe WF, Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling as well. And again, it's just because we hear that like people have a demand for this kind of event. People have products that they want to recycle and they know have valuable components in them, like an iPad or an iPhone or batteries. But they don't really know how to recycle them. And so they end up throwing them in a recycling bin, and then it puts a truck on fire, and we don't want that to happen. So we think that this is a really good project.
Prescription meds is another one. Do we have a bin here?
We do.
Right?
We do in the police department.
Yeah.
And we host take backs and various.
I don't want to know what you do with them after we drop them off. That's none of my business.
Well, that would explain more.
But I think there's a good opportunity to tie that in with stuff like safe disposal as well.
Yeah.
To this kind of event. So
Great.
yeah. Another project that we're recommending is a sustainability celebration event. This kind of ties into some stuff that we already do, but I think it would be a good idea to unify it and promote it as a kind of a unified item rather than disparate things throughout the year. This would be like a community event to recognize and celebrate local efforts that residents and businesses do. It'd be a great opportunity to partner with our business association in the city, the South Valley Chamber of Commerce, and then you may be familiar that we give out annual landscaping awards. So it might be a good opportunity to tie that in as well. We already host some of these events, but this would be a great chance to highlight additional things and excellence by our residents and businesses in the city. So.
And reduction in single-use plastics,
Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
reduction to
Yes.
our landfills.
And a great way to kind of bring the community in and help share different things that they can do to make an impact. Yeah.
Be fun, you could have contests, you could have, like, I know I have all these big bags in my garage, my husband thinks I'm completely nuts, all the things I'm so frustrated that Whitford won't take.
Mhm.
And they're just voluminous, and there's just two of us in our household, and there's so many things that citizens could think about and that they wanna, I think, learn and
Mhm.
become more a part of how to make our world more sustainable. I love it, that's
Is there a
great.
time of year you're looking at for this one?
We don't have anything specifically in mind. I would imagine summer would be or the end of summer.
Will this be like the August block party
Could be,
time?
it could be. If this is kind of agreed as something to move forward with, we'll formulate a plan and then we can come back
Yeah.
with
The
that.
block party kind of featured that,
Yeah.
right?
I'm just imagining we give out those landscaping awards, I think, in the summer. So
Sure, yeah. August
something
or
similar to
September.
that.
I would like to see the landscaping awards focus more on conscientious xeriscaping and less you know, anyways, that I brought that up in last summer, and I'd love to talk to you more. I have some specific ideas. I think incentivizing citizens, because you can do beautiful xeriscaping, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And,
Like
helping them.
We added in the campaign signs into the landscape.
Yeah, right. That was awful. But I will say, I like the xeriscaping, but there are some homes that the amount of work that it takes to build these beautiful gardens, I know it takes more water, but I want to give them a shout out as well. There's some beautiful landscaping jobs around the city. So I don't want to cut them out either.
Well, and keeping like with the dark skies initiative where, you know, people are given kudos for having light features that go down instead of out into their neighborhood, and just helping, speaking of being neighborly. For many of us, we want to look at the moonlight, but instead, I know for me, my neighbors on my street have these lights that just, oh, that's all I can see so I think there's a lot of people that long to preserve the natural, you know, quality in their life but I agree, some of those lush gardens are absolutely
And it
gorgeous.
takes an incredible amount of work.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I do like the business side of this. We recognize one business per year for landscaping, but there's a lot of businesses, even in our corporate centers, that are doing things internally to cut down on waste and, you know, those types of practices that they're just doing for their own benefit, but sometimes publicizing that. Gives
Yeah,
other people good ideas.
I know, I was writing down CHBA, as you said, and then
Yeah.
we're gonna work with, you know, our business association, so I love that kind of thinking. Thank you
Yeah.
Ian, for that.
Yeah, I think it helps bring the community together as well. It's just another one of those things.
Yeah.
So, Mike, do you wanna, oh, you moved on.
Already there.
You're there. And then the last one that we're recommending today, and I'll go a bit more in detail with the additional items, but this one is additional ordinance updates. So with this, we just continue to update city ordinances with reasonable, sustainable standards for new development applications. So some examples of this would be tree preservation standards to encourage people not to cut down thriving existing trees, incentives for sustainability implementation, like home efficiency in new construction, as identified by the council, of course. These code updates would focus on new development and where we can encourage sustainable infrastructure, preservation of natural features and natural landscapes, and then, like I said, energy efficient structures as well. And this could be something we could tie into workshops. I think this would be a really good opportunity to show people how making their home more energy efficient can save them money, but then also help save the earth. So
I like this coupled with the workshops, because typically ordinances are gonna apply for things moving forward, new development, and then for people that want to change something retroactively, it's usually a voluntary thing. And we have our water-wise landscaping ordinance, which applies to new development, but then it qualifies residents with yards today for incentives through the water district. And I think ordinance updates coupled with workshops on what's out there achieves this very well.
Yep. And then 5 additional ideas that we had. I won't go too in depth with these, but I'll just kind of touch on them. The first one was public transportation amenities upgrades. Of course, our public transportation is run by UTA, and we want to support them every way we can. This would be, I guess, to try and identify ways that the city can produce small scale tangible improvements that do make an impact to people that choose to ride our buses and might encourage people to use public transportation more often. The next one would be a community garden feasibility study. This is something.
If I just make clarification, so.
Sure.
So this might be like on Fort Union Boulevard, a little shelter, maybe a little bench, or, I mean, you know, like.
Yeah.
Making it safer as you're waiting for the bus, is that kind of what?
That
you
was
have
our
in
thought,
mind?
is
And-
we can continue our efforts to make transit more viable, and, you know, that's a partnership and a regional kind of collective issue, but, you know, improving a bus stop could be a more comfortable experience, you know, ski bus, but it has a shelter or a place to set your skis or something while you're
Yeah.
waiting.
Because oftentimes that's the factor in people's decision to take a bus or not, is what's waiting there gonna be like? Do I have a place to sit, a place to put my skis? So there's probably ways we could make that experience better.
Great.
A community garden feasibility study was another idea we had. We've heard from a few different parties here and there throughout the year that they wonder why we don't have a community garden here at the city. Neighboring cities do have community gardens. I think there's a successful one in Holiday. Usually a community garden is something that starts kind of at the grassroots level, not from city government, but it would be a good opportunity for us to identify where we can support an initiative like that, or if the appetite for that exists within the city.
Is the Mountain View pollinator garden not a kind of an example of that?
I don't think it would be like a harvest, like fruits and vegetables type of garden. It would just be more decorative.
Has there been any further consideration? I know that the staff presented, based on here, the landscaping around City Hall, we have sodded in areas, where they're not functional. And I'd love to see us consider, see if the council has an appetite for this. Having a citizen-driven initiative to say, here are the places. So instead of spending over $100,000 on paying a firm to redo that, let it be maybe even a competition or something, but have residents say, on these plots, and I know they're not gigantic, but we do have spaces already that we need to redo, and we could even work with the PTOS and Historic Committee to do walks that include, this is residents' idea of, taking existing space and making it into, this is our fruit area and this is our whatever, I don't know.
I think that's something we could do as part of the feasibility study, is identify like locations and opportunities where a community garden could take place. So that's something to consider.
I mean, like small and more
Yeah.
numerous, is what I'm trying to spit out, is small and more numerous
Yeah.
versus
Like
trying to
pocket.
acquire one big garden.
Right.
Do small.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something that you could consider, and I think there's maybe an appetite out there. I don't know, heard from your constituents, but we've heard a little bit at the staff level, a desire for that. The next one would be green stormwater opportunities. This would be us working with Public Works to explore different ways that we could whether it's new development or a retrofit of an existing stormwater structure, kind of implement green opportunities for stormwater, whether that's like a bioswale or a green roof, something like that. We'd have to like explore that and see what those options are, and if there's like a new park being developed, maybe that's an opportunity for something like that. But that's an option you could look at if you wanted to prioritize that.
What are tree grates?
Tree, I think it's just,
GRATES.
That's a tree, when you, in your park strips, you have concrete in the grates, so you're only watering
Oh,
the tree
right.
inside.
Got it. Okay, got
It's
it.
focused on the tree as opposed to the whole park strip.
Got it. Thank you.
so that's an option. The last two, food waste and food security events. This could be similar to like the workshops or the events that we're proposing. Composting is a sustainable way to kind of cut back on food waste, and it results in like a positive product rather than just throwing something into a landfill. So if you wanted to prioritize that, we could explore holding events that deal with those things. And then the last one would be a lighting audit of city facilities and streetlights. A few years ago, we adopted an ordinance to regulate light pollution. Since then, a lot of the city-owned streetlights are probably non-conforming. It's just how it works. That ordinance focuses on new development. So, we're not violating our own ordinance by immediately replacing every streetlight in the city, but it might be good to look at streetlights and maybe determine based on their age or where they're located, opportunities to prioritize replacing them with shielded light fixtures or things that reduce light pollution. So
Are there
that's a
grants
project.
out there, especially if we?
No, part of that one would be a proposal to establish a street lighting fund that Public Works could utilize to repair streetlights as well, but there's no set aside budget item for streetlights right now. So if someone requests, we require them during new development, but if there's a request from one, there's not a dedicated fund.
Doesn't
that I'm
the
aware of.
county have some ownership in them currently?
I'm sorry. Oh,
In street lights?
There are different, that some of them are owned by utility companies. The black kind of decorative ones are all city streetlights.
Oh,
Rocky Mountain Power owns a majority of the lights in the city.
okay.
Yeah.
Utility, I was thinking county. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
The
Utility.
county maintains them for us right now, our streetlights.
Okay,
So that's how that relationship is.
got it.
Yeah.
How did, the utilities get into owning or putting those up or owning them?
I'm sorry?
How did Rocky Mountain Power get into owning streetlight or putting up?
They always have. That
Okay.
was sort of their business. There are. Can I step a minute? Of course, sorry. There are ways, I did this in another municipality where we went through and did an audit of the street lights with Rocky Mountain Power. They're happy to let us have them if we pay for them with, like, I forgot the word now, I've already lost it, but buying them based on their price, their current pricing, not exactly what they went in at, but depreciation, there you go. Sorry, I was missing the word. Buy them on a depreciated value. They're happy to do that, and then we can own them and operate them if we want. You can change your payment schedules from maintenance only from maintenance and light to power only. There's a few things you can do. The light audit, I think is a great idea. This one I'll support. You and I are gonna talk about, anyway, the light audit, is something that there's quite a few companies out there that will come in and do that for a very minimal cost. And supported by Rocky Mountain Power and go through all of these so we can get a good idea. I tried to put one together a little while ago and it didn't catch any legs, but if this is something, an initiative, I'll work with Ian and Mike's group and Ian to determine the best way to do that. But yeah, we can end up, if we go with it, we talk to Rocky Mountain Power, if we want to buy those and start changing out to our standard, that is a possibility.
Yes, that's the
It's
question that I have.
expensive though.
On Park Ridge Drive, there are some street lights and they look like they should be put in some museums.
Sure.
But they're the super, like the most yellow bulb anyone could ever
Yes.
look at. And some of them aren't working as they used to. Are some of those are obviously pre-city, I would guess, and so.
Pre-city, they're gonna be Rocky Mountain Power owned. Even those, they do have some decorative, not a lot, but they do have some.
And if we wanted to fix some of those or whatever, would that be a request we'd send to Rocky Mountain Power?
Correct. And it could be one that we would say, we'd like to just go ahead and purchase these outright and put in our own poles. And then we pay energy only versus energy and maintenance. And so there are some things we can do. Now, the lighting itself, and I'm sorry, I don't know quite everything, but you don't want bright white lights. Because in a snowstorm, you don't see bright white
That's
lights.
true, yeah.
So
for
it's a
sure.
little more dull yellow, and plus it's not as.
And this audit that you're talking about, would that take into account basically the current condition of all of these lights, where we should put some lights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Take into account current condition of the lights, things that are out there. Savings over time, we can achieve if we went in and replaced them all. What's the time to pay that off? I mean, it's whatever you want, but like I said, I've been involved with a couple of them. They are good to have for decision-making processes.
Well, Tim knows this. One of the biggest requests I get are residents that want lights on their streets for obvious reasons, safety reasons. Some of the main thoroughfares like Siesta and others that there's a lot of runners or people that are walking and there's no light out when it gets dark earlier. And so, yeah, an audit sounds super helpful as a first step to figure out what we're working with and where we need to improve. So
Now, we don't have a code requirement except for new development, but on existing, we don't have that code requirement. We have a policy,
It's
but
more
you
of a
have to get
request
the
for
neighbors
sure.
together and there has to be a certain number.
yeah,
Because we oftentimes will find out, yes, I want a street light, but I'd love it on my neighbor's property
for sure.
over there. Or you find out that not everybody agrees with you on the street lights. So we
Yeah.
do have a policy to follow on that.
And I think these neighbors submitted signatures for that specific cause, but it's a funding. It's a funding issue more than anything, so. Okay,
So with next steps, I mean, we've had this discussion. This is great. Thank you for having me. At your 2024 council retreat, which is in just a few weeks, I believe. I guess we can prepare, if you'd like, a fiscal impact estimate for some of these prioritized items or ones that you want us to look into. Mike, You wanna?
Yeah, I think we've recommended the four that we went through in more detail. If you'd like more information on those, you know, a lot of those are hosting events. It's gonna be kind of staff time, but there could be some costs associated with those. So we'll try to have that information ready for you. If you're prioritizing budgets and things like that, I think that's helpful. And then if you'd like more information for any of the other projects, like the streetlight audit or others, we could put together some ballpark numbers for what that would cost. That would be helpful.
And I would probably just say, we put this together and then run it through budget processes with the committees as well.
Yeah.
So if those four are the ones that they're recommending that you want us to pursue, that gives us the direction, and then we can.
So there's there enough time to get some estimates at the retreat, by the retreat? then?
General
General,
estimate, you know.
We can come back to you with more information if you request it
Okay.
after that. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Great, thanks Ian,
Yeah,
thanks for
thanks,
coming,
Ian.
Yeah.
appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is just a review of calendars and upcoming events. So on Monday, February 12th, starting at 6 p.m. there at the City Hall Community Room, I need you to understand, Matt, this is a Death by Chocolate event.
Oh, seriously?
Seriously.
That sounds amazing.
Death by Chocolate. Exactly. Come here to City Hall, the Cullimore Community Room and try it out.
What is this? Okay.
On Tuesday, February 13th at 6 p.m. We talked about this, but we are going to be having the state of the city. And so I think you know, we'll see, we'll evaluate how it goes and how the dude that talks a lot does, I guess. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So we'll, I think.
Do we get to
that's just-
submit feedback? Is that,
We're actually gonna send out the actual speech to you fairly soon, so you'll actually have it and be able to
awesome.
read through it and see what we're gonna talk about. And I think it has a chance to be something cool where we educate residents what the city's been doing. So anyway. On February 19th, Monday, don't come here because City Hall will be closed in honor of President's Day. So on February 21st, on Wednesday, February 21st, we have the East Jordan Canal Trail Feasibility Study Open House. Goodness gracious, that was a long thing to say. I'm not gonna say it again. Wednesday on February 21st, and that's here?
Yeah.
Okay, yep. And then what I get excited about, the Citizens Police Academy starts on February 28th. Did we still have time and room for people to sign up, dude? How's
Sure, we do.
we do? Okay, how's the people, or how many people signed up? Do we know?
We'd have to check.
You don't know?
Yes.
Okay, good. Make sure if you know anybody that wants to learn more about the difficult job of policing in our community to come and sign up. And that goes for how many weeks?
Yeah, you asked me this question. I think it's a total of 10 weeks.
7, 9, 10,
They can
yeah.
come to all of them, or they can come to some of them.
Okay,
Like if they're interested in the jail portion of it, or dispatch, or K9, or SWAT, whatever they're,
perfect.
whatever they can make.
Okay. Matt, once again for you on Friday, March 1st,
Tell me more.
starting at 6:30 at the City Hall Cullimore Community Room, there's a Sweetheart Paint Night.
Oh, I'm in.
I know that.
Are you asking me?
If you've ever, if you were to ask
Is that
Matt,
a hint?
if you were to ask Matt how much money he spent on art in the last year, you would be embarrassed to find out
That
the
is very
number.
true, actually.
So anyway,
That is very true.
come for a much less expensive night on March 1st, Friday at 6:30. Also, we're really excited for the musical editions for Beauty and the Beast that start Friday, March 15th and Saturday, March 16th, and those are here in the Cullimore Community Room as well. And then what I think is just fascinating, if you've never been to the Easter egg hunt, on Saturday, March 30th, there will be thousands of people. And it is fascinating. Chief, you know this. You guys are,
I wish I could be
Uh,
started in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Right.
it is amazing how many people will come to find to get some
That's great.
appreciation.
So if you recall, last year it had snowed. And so we were out there and it was a mud a mud bog. You remember that?
Yeah.
It was quite, I went home and had to put my shoes outside for quite a while. So,
Mayor,
Yes,
March 5th, Republican primary, caucus, excuse me,
Yeah.
from 6 to 8, and that's our council.
so we are gonna talk about that in the retreat about possibly moving it. So it's an item on our agenda.
Because I mean, it's a presidential straw poll, so
Yeah.
you've got to be there.
We're looking at, thank you for bringing that up, and when, we're gonna, anyway, we're gonna talk about that more as a
Thank
council.
you.
And, anyway, thank you.
can I just mention, just a reminder for those that can attend, February 27th is the youth city council dinner. And then
What time's that at?
that is at
Sorry, miss.
6, I believe.
6 o'clock.
Sean and I are gonna miss.
Friday, and, yeah, February 27th.
Yeah.
And then, so we actually did have something to discuss in a closed meeting that we're gonna put off, so do not have anything to discuss this evening in a closed meeting. And so at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn our work session.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.